Hey y'all, howdy y'all. Welcome back to Southern Farm Stories on Crissy's Clucky Chronicles. I'm Crissy, in case you ain't figured that out yet, and I'm your host from the heart of rural, I can't hardly say that word, but anyway, rural eastern North Carolina, where the fields just stretch out like patchwork quilt and the air smells like sweet tea and fresh turned earth. Oh yeah. Now today, I'm going to be switching gears for a special Halloween episode that's all about the fun, factual history of trick-or-treating door to door right here in our neck of the woods, honey. So I want you to just pull up a rocking chair on the porch, grab you a mug of hot coffee, sweet tea, apple cider, or maybe even, like my favorite, a Snickers bar, if you got one handy. Let's just take a spooky stroll down memory lane to the 1970s and early 80s, my time period as a kid. We're going to talk candies that made our eyes light up, homemade treats from kind neighbors, the sweaty adventures of homemade costumes, and how things shifted to more safer times with trunk or treat. This one's going to be a hoot, y'all, just full of Southern charm and true tales from the little farm life growing up in eastern North Carolina. So here we go. Let's spook to it. Now, before we dive into my childhood haunts, let's set the stage with a bit of history, okay? Trick-or-treating ain't just some modern fad. It's got roots deeper than a sweet tater in Carolina soil. The whole shebang just traces back to the ancient Celtic festival of the Samhain, pronounced Samhain or whatever, celebrated it was over 2,000 years ago, in what we now call like Ireland and Scotland. Now, that was the night when folks believed the veil between the living and the dead got thin as a biscuit and spirits roamed free. Now, to keep the ghosts happy and away from mischief, people would dress up in costumes and go door to door begging for food and treats. Now, let's fast right on forward to the mid-1800s when Irish and Scottish immigrants brought all these traditions across the pond to the United States, including right here in the South. Yeah, North Carolina got it too. By the early 1900s, Halloween was mixing Celtic pagan vibes with Catholic All Saints' Day on November 1st, and it really took off as more of a community type of thing. Now, in North Carolina, we already got our rich folklore. Think like haints and boogers from the old tales, okay? Halloween became a time for pranks, parties, and yes, honey, trick-or-treating. But it wasn't until the 1920s and 30s that the phrase trick-or-treat really caught on, thanks to British guys and American mummers who went house to house performing for sweets. In rural areas where I grew up in Johnston County, eastern North Carolina, it was all about tight-knit farm communities way back then. Now, folks around here, they knew everybody for miles and miles around, so door to door, it wasn't just fun. It was a way to build neighborly bonds. There was no big cities here, just a bunch of dirt roads, tobacco barns, and porches lit up with jack-o'-lanterns carved from our own pumpkins. Speaking of which, let's fast forward to the 1970s and early 1980s, the golden era of my trick-or-treating days. Oh, Lord, y'all, growing up poor on a tenant farm with grandparents, Halloween was the one night a year we kids felt like kings and queens of the country and of the whole entire Johnston County. So picture this. It's dusk on October 31st. The air is just crisp. Fall leaves was crunching underfoot and a full moon rising over the field. Now, we bundled up, not in fancy store-bought outfits yet, mind you, but we hit them gravel roads in rural North Carolina back then because houses were way spread out, maybe a half a mile or a mile apart. So we'd get into car or whatever vehicle whoever was taking us at the time, and we'd ride around to the nearest cluster of friendly houses or church folks' houses or whatever, There's no street lights here, no sidewalks, just flashlights bouncing off ditches and the occasional dogs barking from the shadows. The thrill was actually in the unknown. So we'd knock on doors, trick or treat, smell my feet, give me something good to eat, or just trick or treat, or just stand there like a deer in the headlights. And, out would come a neighbor or a church member or a family member, somebody that you knew, with a wash tub or bucket or whatever, just full of goodies. Now, the type of candies we got, that was straight out of a kid's dream. This was the heyday of chocolate bars that just melted in your mouth but not in your hands thanks to M&Ms, you know what I mean? That exploded in popularity way back in the 70s after the TV ads with the plain and the peanut varieties came out. So we all wanted that. Now, Snickers bars is my favorite, and they were a staple. That nougat and peanuts wrapped in chocolate was like a hug from heaven, honey. Then you would get occasional Hershey mini bars and chocolate kisses. Oh my gosh, those full wrap delights were everywhere, especially in the South where chocolate, man, it just hits a little different with our humid nights. And look, don't even get me started on Reese's peanut butter cups. That has been a Southern favorite since the 70s, because who don't love that sweet salty combo after a day of just digging around in the yard or doing something with the animals or just doing nothing but sitting on the front porch? But it won't all store-bought. So in rural areas like ours, homemade candies were the real treasures. Now, those were passed down from grannies and aunts who baked them up with love and maybe a dash of moonshine for the grown-ups. You don't ever know, but it did happen. Now, popcorn balls, honey, them things were huge. You'd get these sticky caramel-coated orbs wrapped in wax paper made from fresh popcorn right there in whoever's kitchen. Oh, my gosh, smelled so good. Now, Granny Lorene was famous for her caramel apples and her also them beautiful red dipped, shiny coated candy red apples. Sometimes it'd have nuts on it, depending, who had the most funds to deal with back then, because this stuff was giveaway. You didn't buy it. Also, there was fudge. Homemade fudge, it was another winner. Sometimes you get chocolate or peanut butter cut into squares, and they were tucked in these cute little bags, and homemade Rice Krispie treats, just simple, chewy squares of marshmallow magic that us poor kids would literally fight over. Now, in the South, sometimes you'd get cornbread muffins or pecan pralines if a neighbor was feeling kind of fancy and had a little bit extra to share. But let me tell y'all, these weren't just treats. It was community. Folks was sharing what they had. Won't no judgments. I remember one year we went to one of the church member ladies' houses down the road who gave us a whole bag of boiled peanuts. A whole bag that she had made in a pot. Just a plastic bag. It was awesome. They were sweet, salty. I just couldn't even explain to you how good it was. That was just straight up, country soul food. Now, of course, we're going to talk about the costumes. Costumes were half the fun, or half the torture, depending on how you looked at it. Now, as poor farm kids, we didn't have money for nothing fancy. You didn't go to stores begging for all these costumes that they have now, that some of them look so real, it would scare your own reflection in the mirror. So, back then, we had to get creative with what was lying around the house. We would use sheets from the linen closet turned into ghosts with holes cut out for eyes. It was just simple as that. We would use old clothes from the attic that become hobo outfits, just complete with all kinds of stuff. You'd have a bindle stick made from a handkerchief tied to a broom handle. You were homeless or whatever, portraying some character the best you could. Now, you could go as a scarecrow using overalls and put some straw from the barn in your pants or whatever. And we also ended up painting our faces with, our aunt's lipstick and use some of Granny's flour for a pale zombie look. It was all DIY, born from necessity. But honey, let me tell you, we felt like stars, Halloween stars, under those harvest moons. Now, by the late 1970s and early 1980s, things leveled up a little bit when plastic masks kind of hit the scene. Oh, those Ben Cooper masks, honey, do y'all remember them? Cheap as dirt from the 5 and dime store, maybe a $1 for a mask and a flimsy vinyl jumpsuit. The masks were molded plastic, painted with cartoon characters like He-Man with his sword or Snoopy lounging on the doghouse, but honey, let me tell you, they was a hot mess. You had tiny little eye holes and nose slits that made breathing a chore. And the elastic band that pinched your head like a vice. Oh my gosh, I remember it now. Now inside your face would, of that face mask, your face, oh my gosh, sweat buckets. It just turned the whole thing into a steamy sauna. And that crunchy plastic, it crinkled with every step, announcing your arrival like a parade. And then if you got in a fight with your brothers, your sisters, or whoever, they'd take that little elastic band from your mask and they'd snap it and pop you with it. You could be He-Man one year swinging an imaginary sword at invisible Skeletors, feeling like the strongest kid in Johnston County. And another time, you could be dressed as Snoopy or Raggedy Ann or Strawberry Shortcake, just complete with a homemade hat from old felt scraps. Hot? Oh my God, yeah. Sweaty? Yeah. But was it magical? For us? You bet your daggone drawers it was. Now, as fun as those nights were, the winds of change was blowing. So by the late 70s into the early 80s, there was a lot of safety concerns that just started creeping in like a fog off the Neuse River, honey. In rural areas like ours, trust was high because everybody knew everybody, so tainted treats, well, they weren't really a big worry. But in the cities and the suburbs, urban legends exploded about poison candy and razor blades hidden in apples. So it all kicked off in 1974 with a horrific true story. Ronald Clark O'Brien, dubbed the Candyman, poisoned his own son and 3 other kids with cyanide-laced pixie sticks in Texas. Now that tragedy made national headlines and sparked a widespread panic. So by the 1980s, reports, mostly hoaxes, mind you, of drugs like PCP and candy or needles and Snickers bars had parents on edge. And there were true stories, there were true things, and people were doing some gnarly, nasty stuff to kids. But can you understand why our folks was just freaking out about that? So folks in non-rural areas, well, hey, they got a little extra cautious. Hospitals and places we'd see on TV like New York and even parts of the South started offering free x-rays for Halloween hauls. Imagine that. Kids lining up post trick-or-treating to get your candy scanned for hidden dangers. Some communities outright just banned door-to-door. Or you had schools that hosted safe parties indoors. I went to a bunch of little school Halloween carnivals, especially in elementary school. In North Carolina, while rural spots like ours just kept on trucking with porch handouts, urban areas like Raleigh, they saw a big shift. The myths were mostly just myths, with studies later showing no real widespread tampering was going on. It was spotty, but still, that fear was real, and it was fueled by media scares. Then it just changed the game for everybody. Now this is where the shift to safer options came in. So this is leading us right into modern times. So by the late 1990s and early 2000s, churches and communities stepped up with trunk or treat. The origins of it? traced back probably around 1994 when Baptist churches in places like Alabama started hosting these events in parking lots called trunk or treats. Now, cars would deck out their trunks with these elaborate themes, spooky skeletons, hay bales, farm scenes, photo opportunities, and they'd hand out candy from the safety of their parking lot, the safety of the trunks of their cars and trucks. There was no dark streets, no stranger doors, just supervised fun under lights. Well, honey, let me tell you, it caught on quick in the South where faith communities are very strong. In North Carolina, small towns like Wilson and Smithfield, they began organizing trunk or treats at churches all across the small towns. Heck, even fire stations and businesses and neighborhoods and EMS stations, they got in on it too. Even the HOAs were setting up community events. And families, honey, they loved it. It was safer for their little ones, especially in rural spots where houses is just spread out. Now today, trunk or treats everywhere, honey. Churches like ours in eastern North Carolina host them with Bible-themed trunks, and small towns throw block parties with hay rides, and businesses like local farms, they're offering apple bobbing, candy, these little fall festivals going along with it. It's just a nod to our community spirit while keeping things safe from traffic and tricks gone wrong. Well, let me tell you, we've come a long way from those sweaty plastic masks, but the joy, well, that's just as sweet as ever. Y'all, all this just takes me right on back to when I was a kid. From the simple joys of door-to-door in rural North Carolina to the safer spots we cherish now. So Halloween's all about making memories with a touch of spookiness. And if this episode brought you a smile or a nostalgic tear, I want you to smack that like button. Just subscribe to Crissy's Clucky Chronicles on YouTube and share your own stories in the comments with me. I love to hear them. Now, we're chasing that 1,500 subscriber goal, and once we hit it, I want you to head on over to CrissyOShow.com to sign up for your free giveaway recipe ebook using the email list. It's free. It's full of farm fun recipes, got a ton of Granny's favorite stuff in there like Granny's banana pudding and just more. And I want to thank y'all for joining me on this Southern Farm Stories Halloween adventure. And remember, y'all, if you can't be good, just be good at it. Happy trick-or-treating, stay safe, and I'll see y'all the next time. And boo to you and you and you.